Are we good to go?
Yes.
Yeah. So, kia ora koutou. Welcome to the Strategy and Policy Committee meeting on 10th of September 2025. We're going to open, we've already had a Karakia this morning because we had Regulation Hearings Committee. And so Chair Pauling will open for us today with a Mihi Whakatau.
A whakatakata hau ki te uru, whakatakata hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kiuta, kia mā taratara ki tai he aki ana te atakura, he teo, he huka, he hauhu ti hei, mauri ora. A te mihi tuatahi, a mihi ki nā atua kaha rawa, a homai o kaha, homai o aroha, kia mātou i tēnei wā i nā wāka tōhoki. A ka huri au taku whakaro ki nā tini aitua, ko wehe atu ki te pō, e nā mate, haere, haere tūra. Apati hono tātou hono o rātou ki a rātou, apati hono tātou hono tātou ki a tātou te hunga ora, a tēnā koutou. E nā kai kauni hera, nā taiohi, Liam, Jolie, nā kai mahi o tēnei kauni hera, tēnā koutou. E nā memo o te hāpori, ko tai mai nei, Anna, Neil, Davina, Dennis Hoki, nei te mihi ki a koutou, ko tai mai nei, ki te wero ki a mātou, tēnā tātou. Tēnā tātou katoa nau mai, hara mai ki tēnei hui o tātou. So just acknowledging everyone here today, those that have gone before us, and also those members of the public that are here to speak to us, as well as our staff and councillors and our youth representatives that are here with us today. So kia ora, thanks Vicky.
Lovely, thank you, Chair Pauling. So we have a quorum present, so just to declare that the meeting is open. We're going to change the order of business in section 9, which is the reports for information. So we'll be taking 9.3 on the land strategy first, then the central government update, and then the strategy and policy committee. So just announcing that at this point. We have no apologies, but Councillor Davies is attending online, as is Councillor Diche. And we have, I have an apology for early departure from Councillor Korako. We have no conflicts of interest I'm aware of. Anyone want to declare? No. And so then to public forums and deputations, we have no public forums today, but we do have deputation. So we have Anna Youngman has come in along with her husband and representing her husband and affected neighbours, and we'll talk about the health issue she's dealing with living opposite a quarry on the West Coast Road. So Anna, would you like to come to the table? And your husband's welcome to come with you as well if you'd like. Now, I'm thinking that you're just going to speak to the issue. There's no presentation that you're putting up. No, so that's great. That keeps it simple and is perfect. So just to say, there's 10 minutes to speak and take questions. And so if you could just, if you can, keep it a wee bit shorter than the 10 minutes, and then that gives time for questions. I suspect there will be a few. Yeah, but you're welcome to start. Thank you.
Just press the button.
Oh, sorry, and the
please.
button. I didn't remember to say that.
Big one.
There we are.
Well, good morning. I want to thank you for allowing me to speak this morning. The residents on the Old West Coast Road have all been in contact, well, the ones close to Road Metals Extension have been in touch with me. They felt they just couldn't come and hear the same story over and over again. They asked if I would like to come along, and I was only too happy to come because my husband and I have lived with this since 2000. Well, we've been on our property for the last 20 years. When we moved from Banks Peninsula, we were very fit and very healthy, and we thought we would spend our twilight years in Yoldhurst. And we enjoyed it for some years until everything changed. About 2015, Wintstone's quarry applied for an extension. We had no idea what we were in for, but they were granted the extension. And of course, it was just downhill from then on. And since then, other quarries have joined, Fulton Hogan, and of course now Road Metals. It's just been one disaster after another. We have been promised so much, and I felt that I had to come when I heard the Moat report mentioned 2 or 3 weeks ago in this room. The Moat report was flawed from the start, and why I say that, it was to go for 12 months. It went for 3 or maybe 4. It happened to be the wettest summer we had on record, and during that time, the quarries were on leave for their Christmas holidays. That came out of it. It was just absolutely flawed. I don't know why so much money was spent on the Moat report when it wasn't given the full time, but that's how our thoughts were with the so-called Moat report. It did nothing to help our situation. What I really want to talk to you about is crystalline silica. I know that you'll have all heard the name, but what I want to know is, do you all understand the components of crystalline silica? Neil and I have been over to Australia, to the Queensland government, on 4 occasions, and they've been very accommodating. We met their enforcement officers, and really to come back and to see what happens here when there is a dust episode, it's just unbelievable. In Australia, a bond is put up, a $10 million bond by the quarry concerned, and if they are caught with overexposure, then it is for the site quarry manager a personal conviction, and the quarry is closed down immediately. Why I'm comparing this, we were told by members of your staff in our home, in the presence of Dr. Alistair Humphrey, that any dust over the boundary, and they would see to it that the gates would be closed until an investigation was made. There's no use enforcement officers making an appointment, going out to the quarries and seeing a sanitised act every time. In fact, the last time that I made a complaint about excessive dust, I was phoned 3 days later, and I was told that someone came out. They couldn't make it that day, but they came out the next day, and they were at my gate for quite some time. They also sat at the quarry gate and saw no dust. The crystalline silica dust is the danger dust, and that is invisible. And that is caused when the grey wacky rock is crushed, and this is what happens on many occasions along the east coast. Not all New Zealand shingle quarries have the extent of crystalline silica. My neighbour, my direct neighbour, had an analysis done, and it came back from the Adelaide laboratory of 30% crystalline silica off the balcony. But it would be a lot more than that, because that sample that was sent away to be analysed was swept up on his balcony, and it would have gathered other dust too. But the actual components of crystalline silica was 30%. And that neighbour and ourselves have lived through this, which has just been unbelievable. I'll just briefly run through the health effects that have been absolutely. Well, the best thing is that the specialists have all said you must leave. But realistically, who would you sell your property to? And number two, I wouldn't want anyone to go through what I know that we could be in for and will be with road metals, because the quarries are dictating 100%. We have the same commissioners. It just goes on and on. Never mind about the health issues, because they haven't been listening. And it was very enlightening when you opened your last meeting to hear a member of the Canterbury, I don't know the new name, Health Board, actually say that dust is serious. In a quarry situation, the quarry workers are on shift work. They're in cabs, and it's all air conditioned. We are living 24/7. We are outdoors most of the time. We come in, this is when the crusher is being used. Our eyes are streaming. We have blood in our nose. We have respiratory problems, and it's just unbelievable. It really is. My husband, only last year, went with myself, we went just to have our eyes tested at Curtis in Fendleton, Mr. Curtis, and just to get new glasses it was. And my husband's eyes were coming, one was really bad with glaucoma, and so we were sent to Southern Eye Specialists and were under a Dr. Diwali. Now, with Neil's complaint, it's not hereditary. I know many elderly people suffer from glaucoma, but we've had no incidents of an eye problem. And Dr. Diwali treated Neil's, well, you can't treat glaucoma. He had an implant from the eye bank, and within 6 months, the other eye, the good eye, was affected with the glaucoma, so he had the other eye done. Now, fortunately, we had the funds to have both eyes with the implants, and Dr. Diwali said within 8 or 9 months, had it not been diagnosed, he would have lost his sight completely. Now, that is just something unbelievable, because it goes down to the dust, because when we would come inside on a dusty day, when it's southerly, that's when we are being affected from the quarry dust. Early on, I phoned my elected member of ECAN, who was in our district at the time, and told him about the health issues. My response was, well, what do you want me to do? I spoke to and had coffee with Erin Brockovich when she came to Christchurch. She knows all about it. She warned me. And when I went to Australia, I brought up many of these points with how they treat their residents. And I just can't believe this is the Garden City, and that we've been put through all of this. And because people that are making decisions haven't got the qualifications. I have it from a scientist that he doesn't really know much about the health issues of the dust. Dr. Alistair Humphrey was right at the start to say when the dust is bad with the health, it is so serious, it's like the bench tops. The bench tops is crystalline silica. Now, we're exposed to it 24/7. Our windows, we had to wear masks in 2018. We were told to wear masks and sunglasses when we went outdoors. Long before COVID, we were wearing masks, myself and my direct neighbours. 7 of them have moved on and sold to a quarry. Now, the quarries those tenants aren't going to complain, because they're not going to complain to ECAN. So when ECAN says, well, we haven't had many dust complaints this month, you're not going to, because the majority homes are owned by the quarries.
Yep. Okay. Thank you so much for your all the points that you've raised. It is really important that we hear from people directly from the public. So thank you so much. So I'm just wondering, have we got questions? Have councillors got questions? I haven't seen any hands go up while I've been sitting.
Could I just please ask? Oh, sorry.
So, Councillor Greg Burns.
Kia ora. I'm not going to get into a statement, although I've got great sympathy for you. Absolutely. My question, you just mentioned it's the southerly wind that is most impacting your property?
Yes, it's the southerly.
Sorry. It's the southerly wind that we notice it. We notice the stock to sheep with pink eye that is just not the normal. It just streams. It's so hard to explain how you feel with it. It's just terrible. I want to know, with this last, with Road Metals extension, we went to the hearing, and of course we objected. Why, when they appealed, were the conditions wiped, and who wiped those conditions? Because none of the submitters were present. We didn't even know when the appeal was, and now we find that the quarries will be virtually self-monitoring. And last time, Road Metals had one monitor that wasn't near the quarry. It was shaded and it was vandalised. The one that was on the resident's property, there was one that was on a resident's property. It ended up being vandalised. The only people that would know where that monitor was were quarries. I don't know who any more about it than that, but we just haven't been given a fair chance, the health especially. It's a killer dust.
Can I just say thank you for that? And sadly, it's not an uncommon story you're telling us.
So Councillor Swiggs.
No, I might leave my question to the staff, but thank you very much for coming in. I really appreciate it.
And Councillor Robinson.
Thank you for coming in today. It gives a fuller picture of what's sort of going on and what could be done in the future. With regards to monitoring of the sites, have you yourselves worn personal devices to pick up any dust?
Sorry, our neighbours have. We haven't, Neil or myself. But what we would really request from ECAN is a monitor on our property, and both sides, the neighbours spoke to me last night, they would be only too happy to have monitors on their properties.
Yep.
Can we add that as maybe something that we could look at for staff to come back at some point, like a secretarial note? Thank you.
And Councillor East.
A twofold question, I suppose. One to the submitters and one of our staff ultimately. Would an adequate watering system in these quarries negate many of your issues?
Perhaps I can answer that. It was mentioned at the last hearing that there's a problem with lack of water as well. Water certainly depresses it, and there is a additive you can put in the water which depresses it or keeps the dust down even more. But the quarries don't want to know about that.
Yeah, thank you. And I think a point that may need to be addressed by our organisation, I believe that there is an issue in the consenting process with use and take of water, and which prevents some of the quarry operators actually implementing adequate suppression of dust. So I would like to pose a question to our staff. What options have we got, or how far are we going in trying to overcome this take and use of water, regardless of how much there is there? I mean, they can bring water in a tanker and do whatever, but it seems though that there is a restriction on our ability to control some of these issues because of our consenting regime and the impediments to allowing quarry operators to actually take and use water. So just would like that clarified internally, please.
Yeah. So I understand that there are techniques that can be used, and the conditions still stand, but we can certainly add that. And we did have PC8 in process, but that's currently sitting at the government, I understand, to see where that moves next. So, Ian, are you wanting to ask a question?
Thank you, Vicky. Thank you for your presentation. Have you seen the agenda item for this committee meeting we've got today in terms of the dust recommendations around dust? In which case it's a moot question. I was going to ask your opinion on the recommendation.
No, I haven't seen the recommendations, but I just feel like the other residents, we just have no faith in Environment Canterbury, because at the moment we've got no one to complain to that can come out with the experience. The experience is the big thing, not a short course at ARIA and ring and let the quarries know they're coming. I would like to see that the enforcement officers can arrive out at a quarry at any time. I'm sure they can do it, and inspect and just test what's going on. For instance, when Windstones were stripping the trees for their quarry, it was unbelievable. It was like cowboys in a western. They had diesel on the property, and ourselves and two other neighbours felt this terrible jolt. We thought it was another earthquake. It was so bad, and it had got out of hand. We phoned the fire brigade. We phoned so many people. It was very hard to get anyone to help. It's just, you know, the quarries were reigning supreme. I'm talking about Windstones, but Road Metals and Fulton Hogan are no different, because we get the same, it's just the same people involved all the time. Why can't we have an Australasian expert that really knows about it and about the dangers of crystalline silica? It is a killer.
Fabulous. Thank you for raising all those points. And so we're going to have we've got a recommendation to come up for this. And so just getting that up. Here we go. So do I have a mover for this, Councillor Swiggs and Chair Pauling? So this is to receive your deputation, Anna, which is regarding item 4.2, which we'll come to. Don't item 4.2? Is that right? Yes. Because your deputation relates to 7 point something, but the 8 point something, but that's fine. You'll get it now. It's deputation, and then we'll provide an answer to you, Anna. So there will be a letter that will come to you from the organisation addressing some of the points that you've raised. So,
thank you very much. And can we find out about if there's no consent, why did we all bother going to a hearing in front of the Commissioner? He set the consents, and now we learn that we're left really in mid-air.
Okay, so that the staff will come back. I'm presuming that.
Thank you.
Yeah, those various points will have been captured, and we'll address those in the response to you.
I'd appreciate that, and I'm sure neighbours will appreciate it too.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Appreciate that. Kia
Thank
ora.
you.
Thank you. So can I have all those who are in favour of aye? Any against? No. So that's carried. Thank you. Now we did have Dennis Thompson coming, but I understand that he's not in the room. No. So I think we'll just move on. So then we've got no extraordinary and urgent business. There are no notices of motion. So then we're into the minutes. And so item 7.1, the unconfirmed minutes. So we'll bring up the resolution for that. Can I ask councillors, has anybody got anything they wanted to identify, any errors or anything in the minutes? Oh, you're going to move it? Okay. So I've got mover, Councillor Scott, seconder, Councillor Burns. Spelt correctly. There we go. So all those who are in favour, please say aye. Any against? No. So that's carried. Thank you. So now I'm going to welcome. So we're on to item 8.1, which is the report on dust. So this is the options for dust research and improving dust management in Canterbury. And so can I invite Zelenica, who is the strategy advisor for air quality, transport, urban development, to come to the table, along with Jessie Burgess, who's our senior strategy manager, and Amy Allinson. Amy's not in the room at the moment. She'll come back.
Yeah. Can I foreshadow an amendment, please, at this stage?
Yes. Yes, I think you can.
Okay. That's new to me too. I would like to have some of the wording in the recommendations changed to include both rather than or. Foreshadow.
Right. So so that was the question. So we'll ask the question, Councillor Robinson, ask the question that you had earlier, and then we can see if there is actually a distinction between the two, or if one is essentially an extension of the other. So that might then change what you're thinking. But yeah. Okay. So Dalenica and Jessie, would you like to present the paper?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This report updates and replaces a previous report left to lie on the table at the Strategy and Policy Committee meeting held on 4 June and seeks the committee's agreement to further scope potential research on monitoring background levels of dust. I'll take the report as read, but will draw your attention to just some of the key points. On 4th June, a report was brought to the committee outlining options related to the Regional Council's work on dust and to seek agreement to further scope potential research into background levels of dust. The committee agreed that the report would be left to lie on the table to allow staff to provide further information on key matters raised at the meeting and to arrange further discussions with Te Whatu Ora regarding the updated health statement on dust. On 21 July, Regional Council and Te Whatu Ora staff briefed councillors on Te Whatu Ora's updated health statement and how it is incorporated into our consenting, compliance and planning practices. Based on these discussions and the feedback from councillors, this report includes updated recommendations for the committee's consideration. Some of the key recommendations to note in this report include Recommendation 3, which requests staff to prepare for the next council a detailed scope focusing on one of the potential options. So measuring localised background levels of dust in residential areas around Christchurch quarry zones with a short-term research site. And as previously noted in the paper, the indicative cost is around $100,000 to $200,000, and that's over 1 to 3 years. Or measuring localised levels of dust in residential areas around Christchurch quarry zones with a long-term environmental impact monitoring site. And just want to note there is a difference between the two options. So option 3.2, it's around permanent monitoring. And also want to note that this was out of scope for the previous paper, and that's why we haven't done the analysis. and the option was formed after the briefing that we had a couple of weeks ago. So if you agree to this recommendation, staff will come back with a detailed scope that will include costings and benefits. There is another recommendation, so recommendation 4, which requests staff to prepare a detailed scope for ambient background levels of dust in central Canterbury Plains with a 10-year research site. So this option is considered to be useful from a science and climate perspective, but not useful to address health concerns around quarry dust. There are also new recommendations, so recommendations 5 and 6, which relate to writing to the Minister for the Environment and the Ministry for the Environment, recommending that the National Environmental Standards for Air Quality be reviewed. I'll take the rest of the report as read and happy to address any questions or points of clarification as required, Madam Chair.
So I've got Councillor Swiggs.
Yeah, I just wanted to start with a question, and I know that I've pre-warned the question, which is relating to the dust briefing that we had a couple of weeks ago, or a week or so ago, and it was around the while talking about it and the appropriate setback distances, it was suggested that the moat study focused on total suspended particulates. Now, is that correct? And can you talk about the distinction and why that matters?
Hi, I'm Angie Scott and I'm in the Climate and Equality Science team. The moat study measured PM10 and it measured PM2.5. So PM2.5 is very fine particles and PM10 is a bit coarser than that. But total suspended particulate is anything above that size. So it can include, 50 or higher micrometers in size. So it's, and a lot of that, the difference between these things is how it is taken in by humans. So it's whether you breathe it in and breathe it out again, or whether it's actually caught up in the nose, or it drops out of the sky basically as well. It's deposited. So that's why they distinguish between those different types of PM.
And so just to be clear, that what was said in that briefing was incorrect. And
yes, that was correct. Yeah, that was the information provided at the meeting with the briefing, as Angie just corrected, was So.
Thank you. That's good to clarify that. Just in terms of the recommendation 3, I've heard what others have said, and do you think that we can look at requesting a scope for both the shorter term and the longer term issues with a staged? Because it's you're going to be coming back with a recommendation or a scope in study, I suppose. And would there be, when you do that, do you think you can do both, and then with a clear transition planning between the short term and long term? Because I do understand what the medical officer of health has said, so I just wanted to clarify to see if there is an option that we can do both.
Sorry, Councillor, could you just clarify the short to long term research site that you're talking about? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Short-term into long-term research site as opposed to a long-term environmental impact monitoring site. So
no. So more for the health side of stuff. I think I'm more leaning towards probably deferring resolution 4, because I think it muddies the water for what we're talking about here. But more the 3.1 and the 3.2 that you've got in this here, transitioning from that short term to the long term. And when you come back and do the scope, when you come back and when you do the scoping and bring this back to us, can we do both? Because in the resolutions you've got either.
So through your chair, yeah, absolutely. Look, so we could, if it's of the mind of the council, to look at both 3.1 and 3.2, so transitioning, do some short-term research, we scope what that looks like, how we transition from short-term research into long-term monitoring. If that's the resolution of this council to address the issues that are on the table, happy to scope that up, bring that option back to council with the associated costs, impacts, etc., so that you have a full picture of what that would actually look like for the next council to commit to. So.
Thank you. That's really useful. And one more question I've got is around the status quo that's in the resolutions for the community engagement. If we're going to do sort of this type of study, in that scoping exercise, I firmly believe that there's probably a better way we can engage the community alongside the scoping. So I'm not sure I like the wording of the status quo is good enough. So is there any recommendations that you can say to sort of just be, this is an active community and I want to make sure that they come along this journey with us?
So through you, Chair, again, I think as part of the scoping exercise, absolutely looking at engaging with the community about where is the most appropriate sites for monitoring and addressing some of the concerns that you've actually just heard in the last speaker. So part of that scoping would need to consider where are the most appropriate sites, and we're trying to deal with some issues here that you're well aware of. So I think that engagement aspect needs to be considered as part of that. So absolutely.
Last question on that point.
What's the last question?
It's still on this last question. But would you support in Resolution 7 that we've got here? You've just got note the existing mechanisms for community and stakeholders to engage with us is appropriate. But would you think that we could amend that to saying working with the community in the scoping exercise or in the scoping of what we're doing? Because I just don't want it to be us doing it. I firmly believe that we need to work with this community in both the scoping and the solution.
It's hard to know what you're meaning exactly. Like if you're talking about consulting with the community while developing the scope, then that's quite a lot of work that's involved with that and will take quite a lot of time. And I'd like to note that for the Oldhurst study, the community was consulted on that, and we consulted with lots of different people before we developed that Oldhurst study. And then the following Dust 2 project that was also run by ECAN, there was a lot of community consultation through that process as well. So we've sort of, like, these things just slow things down. That's, the more consultation that we have to do, the slower it is to get a scope done.
But we can.
Yeah, I think doing it right is probably where I'm sitting at the moment rather than fast. But anyway, I'll think of it.
So we'll take the direction. As Angie has just said, we can do that or we can not do that. and this will be just around how long it takes to do the work. So, yeah.
So I'll ask a question on that point. So essentially in terms of scoping up, your intention would be to scope up on a scientific basis within the work when it's actually then being carried out, or if it's decided to put the funding to it and carry out the work at that point, then there could be engagement at that point, and would that be incorporated into the scoping, the costs that are brought forward for scoping? I guess, can you look at how best to engage with the community in actually then delivering that piece of research? I think that's the crux.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's exactly what we would do. Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Scott.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think from my point of view, there's a lot of stuff that we're talking about is just operational. It's just stuff that we're trying to do to gather information. I've got a number of questions about this, and as I did say earlier, that I was the councillor responsible for bringing the air plan in. So my questions are these: is that the national environmental standards for the HAPPENS, air quality, updated health and air pollution in New Zealand, haven't changed for a long, long time. And I know that we, and there's people in this room, have actually been Vanessa and others who have been part of this. And every time we go to make a representation, it doesn't happen. The World Health Organization, though, has brought out some pretty interesting information. So strategically, I think there's some stuff that you will find out if you do these studies. And I'm happy with 3.1 because I think 3.1, we've got an airshed and we can move some of that asset around and actually capture some of that stuff a bit better. So I don't think that's huge for us. I think we should be doing that. This keeps bouncing into this room all the time, and we keep refuting information that's been collected, and Te Whara Ora get involved, and then they don't get involved. And we need to be systematically hard-nosed about this in terms of how we get to where we get to. One of the questions that I have, if we have an airshed close to that, does it pick up crystallised silica? Do we pick that up in our the sucky thing that sucks the air into? And because forensically we're really good at actually looking at that stuff, but would we pick the crystallised silica that was being spoken about?
If we're measuring PM2.5, so whatever we would do, we'd be capturing all the particles at least the very fine stuff. So the RCS is actually 4 microns, I think it is. So if we were measuring PM10, then it would measure dust from all sources that are within that size.
Chair, can I just keep going on that? So if the evidence that we have at the moment on 2.5, because 2.5 is not enforceable because we're PM10, aren't we, in the air plan? So we have to change our air plan. And that would then, that'll be my final question. If we get the evidence and we want to change the air plan, how long will that take? Because it'll take a plan change to do that, obviously.
If there's evidence for RCS, you're talking about?
If governors of this council assess the evidence that's collected, however that is collected, obviously we need to do something. And we suggest that, hey, our document isn't up to date because it affects consents being issued and those things. That's the cascading effect at plans. How long will it take to change that plan?
Through you, Chair, you've had... we have. I was going to answer on behalf of Lisa, but Lisa's here, so she can answer the question around the resource management reforms.
So the air plan is currently within the scope of the full review of the plan framework that we're looking at. As you know, we're looking at the moment at the foundational work for that because actually progressing plan changes is not something that's available to us at the moment.
I recognise that, but I think we're dealing with a community that's asking us questions about what can we do about it, and we can collect evidence, but what can we do about that? You know, what can we do with the evidence? I mean, we can enforce consent conditions and those sorts of things, but for a really solid outcome, we need plan change, and that's going to be predicated by what the Ministry for the Environment will allow in the next wee while. And I don't see any appetite at all. So I think we owe it to the people that are here, that talked to us before, to say this is a bit of a slow progress on this. This is nothing's going to happen tomorrow on this. Is that fair?
Through you, Chair, just to respond, I mean, one of the resolutions in the paper is for us to, again, approach the Ministry and the Minister and the Chief Executive of the Ministry to essentially update the NES on air quality to include the World Health Organization and HAPPENS research into the planning framework, which would then come down the chain, as you know, to then be reflected through our plans as well. That would give it more emphasis in that respect. As Lisa said, we're in a position at the moment with our planning frameworks that we are in a responsive space with central government reforms. So as a council, that's our decision. Again, if you wish to pursue this, how we pursue it. So, yeah.
One last thing. I seem to remember that when we attempted to do this in the past, there wasn't a national appetite for it. We had some appetite for it. This council had some appetite for it because we've got a good system of airsheds across the region, but other regions weren't have an appetite for it. So it's going to take a bit of push to get that done. So thank you, Chair.
That's great, thank you. I would just like to dig in a little on the crystalline silica question. So can I just confirm that what we're saying here is that the PM2.5 component of, say, a whole, if you take PM10 sample and you work out what the PM2.5 component of that is, that will all be crystalline silica? No.
No, it won't. The crystalline silica is actually 4 microns, so it's between 2.5 and 10. So it's a component of that, but we're only measuring the particulate matter. We can't tell, like with the way that we're measuring it, we don't separate out or measure the RCS separate. It's a component of, it's just caught up in all the other particles of that same size.
But from what we heard from the deputation, there is analysis that can be done to work out what is the crystalline silica fraction.
Yeah.
And then building on a question from the last meeting we had, I asked about the angularity of particles, so the distinction between when you've got crushed particles that are coming from a crushed product versus particles that have been rolling around in the air through the processes that have brought the dust onto the planes in the first place. So is that something that will be looked at within the scope, actually identifying that? Because my understanding from the Australian work is that there is a particular component which is the part that is of particular risk to health, which is the sort of angular particles and the crystalline part. So is that something that we would be looking at in our work?
Could I suggest that if council goes with one of the resolutions on the table, that we take a note of that and bring that back as part of as a question to answer as part of the scoping exercise? Just also note that Dr. Brunton from Te Wharaora was part of the briefing here 2 weeks ago and did address the issue of crystalline silica dust as well. So just remind councillors of the discussion there as well.
And just to remind, also our own Enforcement Officer James Tricker commented that we do intentionally put the crushing part of a quarry site further away in recognition of the fact that there is a greater issue around the crushed dust product versus. So we have made that decision, albeit that I recognise that Dr. Brunton didn't seem to think there was necessarily an issue from my memory of that conversation. But I think, we have already acknowledged that to some extent within our own planning condition or planning decisions.
Yeah. And through you, Chair, that's reflected as part of conditions of consent on resource consents as well, and the compliance approaches around monitoring at the boundary and those aspects as well, which were discussed with Council at the briefing.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Burns.
Kia ora, thanks, Chair. Now, while not to the scale and the impact from the people that live near the quarries, I get a lot of complaints, concerns from residents, especially on the eastern side of the suburb, about areas where they store the same quarried material. Maces Road, we've got KB, Ensaws Road, we've got Fulton Hogan. While it's not to the scale, the health impacts are similar, if not the same. So is it worth adding those as Councillor Swiggs had talked about, the scoping of the proposal for 3.3 and 3.1 and 2? Is there merit to that?
Through you, Chair, I'll attempt to answer that. I don't have any information on those specific sites that you refer to, Councillor, in terms of any issues that have arisen as such, so we'd have to look into that. But this has been predominantly focused around the Aldhurst area. So in terms of any investigations, we'd have to have a chat with our compliance team around the degree of issues that you're talking about on particular sites. And whether there's a need for a similar sort of approach in different locations around the city. How those sites are measured, monitored, and in terms of compliance with conditions of any consents on those sites as well would all be part of that discussion as well.
Thank you. That's very good. But I'm presuming that you would accept that if it is an issue for dust in those areas near those stockpiling sites, given the health issues would be the same, that it would be of benefit to the residents that live there?
Again, I don't know the specifics of particular sites, so it's kind of difficult to say, to be honest, because every site's different, every environment's different, receiving environments are different. So we would need to look into in particular circumstances, I think, and if that was a need that arose, then something that we could address further. So.
Okay. Councillor McKenzie.
Just two questions. In point 16 on page 20 of 62, you suggest that a targeted rate would need to be considered. What zone were you thinking of for the targeted rate? And the second component of that question is, when you consulted with the community around the dust issues, did you talk about a potential targeted rate for those people?
I'm trying to. I can't remember if that was discussed. The consultation was quite a while ago now, and I can't remember if targeted rate was part of the discussions.
Through you, Chair, I think in terms of that option one that you're referring to, Councillor, in paragraph 16 of the report, that's something that we would bring back as part of the scoping advice to Council, is about how this would be funded. So total cost, we're just indicating to Council that this would require a funding approach, and that is through rates. So what rating approach we take would be dependent on the who benefits, who pays, etc. So that's part of that scoping exercise, is to understand what that would look like. So, and to the extent that that targeted rate would apply, or if it wasn't appropriate that a targeted rate and it was a general rate, that's something that Council would need to consider at the time with the right advice from staff in that regard.
And just to add to Jesse's point, if we were going down targeted rate pathway, would need to consult with the members of the public as well. So we have thought about these issues, but we'll go into a bit more detail once we scope out the next piece of work.
Thank you. Councillor Sunkel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick comment on 3.1 and 3.2. I guess given the perceived deficiencies of the moat report, then I guess I would like to see that initial piece of work done, which would inform possibly something a little more long term, which is part of the 3.2. And I think that then takes away the arguments or debates of weather and wind and a whole bunch of things. My question is comes back to actually number 4. And what is it that we really expect to gain out of monitoring across the Central Plains? Farming in the Central Plains, we have nor'westers, we have dust storms, things happen, and we have for millennia the Port Hills and the lowest soils. That's life. So I'm just wondering what we would achieve from that, and would the money be better spent working around that Yoldhurst area rather than expanding forward? So just what do we expect to gain out of it in real terms?
I think that there were just a number of options that were put forward, and that particular one is really more long-term science, and it's looking at what are the particle concentrations like in an area on the plains, because the thing is, of course, you can't really define background. It's different in every place. There's lots of different impacts in different areas. So in one particular area, so be looking at long-term trends, like whether there are particles that are travelling along the plains, long distance, more particles, and looking at what's happening there is looking at what does, are the general dust levels increasing as the area dries in terms of looking at climate change. So it's sort of more looking forward and just seeing how things might change over time, what happens when there's more fires, things like that. So it's more, like I said, that's more of a general science question rather than a specific background levels at Yoldhurst.
No, thanks for that. So, yeah, it's just the accumulation of science and knowledge. Thanks.
Thank you. Next. Chair Pauling.
Kia ora, thank you. Just 2 questions. So, just focusing in on recommendation 3 and the 2 options. First of all, what's the Te Whatu Ora preferred? I think I read it in number 18 pretty clearly there, but just to confirm, what's their preferred option?
It was, as written in the report, Chair, it was the 3.2 around the long-term monitoring site. Yep.
And what's the staff recommendation?
Happy to. I mean, this is an issue arisen in an area of Yoldhurst. Doing some further short-term research would be option 3.1. Sorry, and then as Councillor Swiggs said, if we do that research, then we could potentially look at that longer-term monitoring site. I think that might be the most appropriate way of approaching this. So let's do the initial research. Let's understand the science data that's coming from that, and then make an informed decision around what is the long-term monitoring in the area and how do we go from there. So I think it's a good suggestion from Councillor Swiggs that we take that staged approach and maybe potentially merge 3.1 and 3.2 into one resolution. But we scope that and bring that as advice to Council to consider as part of that longer-term approach to dust monitoring.
And just to add to Jesse's point, the difference between 3.1 and 3.2, how 3.1 is around research and 3.2 is around permanent monitoring, and there are costs associated with it. So we'll just have to word that carefully.
I'm asking because I'm pretty clear from what Cheryl told us and what's written in 18, and also from the Te Whatu Ora response to our designing a solution to dust process that we had back in July, that they stated that Te Whatu Ora does not agree with PDP's recommendation to assess the effects of climate change on dust discharge, investigate the ecological impact of dust, quarry dust, or explore the differences between dust sources, i.e. background dust. We view these as investigations as distractions from the primary community concerns regarding the health impacts of quarry dust discharges. And Cheryl was pretty clear just the other week that she believes the long-term monitoring with residents is the best thing to do. So I don't support 3.1, and even 4 I'm not really supportive of, because I think it is a distraction. I think we just need better monitoring around the quarries between them and residents. That's the thing we need. And if we do, I think even some of the detail around crystalline silica detection is not necessary, because if PM10 is found over the boundary of quarries, then we know it's getting out, and that's all we need to know. Because that's what the conditions of consent say. So I'm really supportive of 3.2. I support, but I'll do this in the debate. Sorry, I've gone a bit far, but that's why I asked, because I think it's pretty clear from the experts what they're saying to us. Well, Te Whatu Ora is the expert.
I think it is that's definitely a valid point to ask the question rather than debate, because debate is amongst a whole bunch of us who are not experts in this topic. Just to, if I can try and elaborate or nut out where Chair Pauling was going with that. If we're looking at, so under 3.1, we're talking about maybe a 1 to 3 year piece of research. But in the process of doing that, does that give us a stronger ability to understand in that shorter term whether or not quarries are meeting their consent obligations? And if instead we were to do 3.2, would that change the timeframes in which we would understand and be able to hold to the consent conditions? Like, is there a difference in terms of our ability as the regulator to respond to the existing issues around, or potential issues around, the quarry dust, whether we go down path 1 or path 2? Is there a difference in the point in time in which we would expect to be able to actually do something about the effects impacting on people now? I hope that makes sense.
So, Teresa from Science can help us with that question.
Kia ora, Teresa Abakan from the Data Integrity team. There isn't a lot of difference between the short term and the long term in terms of the actual monitoring, and we would be able to find out, given the no rain, if it's dusty, then we would find out how the concentrations are, immediately every day. The difference is, if we were to do the short term and there were exceedances of PM10, then we would likely keep monitoring and it would become permanent. But the permanent, if we were to start with a permanent, it's just an idea of cost that you're committing to.
So in terms of, so either 3.1 or 3.2, in terms of outcomes for the existing communities potentially affected, there's no difference in either of those in terms of the sort of speed at which we would get the data that would enable us to look and do something. No difference in time. It's really about the location that we choose. And so if it's residents to the north who are infected by a southerly, then the site would need to be between the quarry and the residents. But if it was a northwest wind, then there would be other people impacted. So that would be more sites. So the cost comes with how many sites. Okay. And in terms of 3.1 and 3.2, so it's 3.2 covering a wider area and would take into account those differences of where you are relative to the wind direction?
I didn't read it like that. I assumed it was one site for 3.1 or 3.2. I guess we come back with the costs.
Yeah.
So I think perhaps, sorry, just to clarify. So I mean, in a way, this is the scoping that's important. Is like, which I think I spoke to in the past. Is really understanding like where are the most impacted communities. Where that's where we need to be initially, at least getting the data, and then I think from the 3.2 and Te Whatu Ora's reasoning behind going with 3.2 is the fact that it's gathering enough data to support a better understanding of health effects as well, which can then lead into, cut me off if I'm wrong, but I think that's then leading into an ability to apply some better understanding in other contexts and places, or at least other places. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's my understanding as well. The short term will give us that opportunity to understand if there's further the issues that are at hand at the moment, and if there is an issue of PM10 escaping from the quarry zone. Then, so part of the scoping exercise is to look at, as Teresa just said, like where would the best locations be for those monitors? How many monitors? How much is the cost associated with that? And then build that program, if you like. So if we do that 3-year short-term research, acknowledge Chair Pauling's points from Te Whatu Ora as well, the longer-term monitoring will give us that longer-term data, which informs better decision-making as we go forward. So I think part of this is about getting direction from council about, do we do the short-term scoping piece and do the longer-term scoping piece, bring the bits together, and actually give council a good understanding of what's involved and how much it's going to cost and what the benefits and things would be associated with that. So it's more detailed than what you've essentially got in the papers today.
Yeah. And I think that's why there's so many questions, because it doesn't feel like there's quite enough here, and it's clearly needs expertise around it. And so to leave it with a council of non-experts to sort of try and round all this out seems a little bit unfair.
So Chair, we just ask, essentially what this recommendations in front of council are is to endorse us going away and doing further work. So this is a step in the process towards attempting to address potential issues here with the quarries. So scoping this work will give the council the good understanding of what's involved, how much it's going to cost, as I said, and then we can go through those processes after that. So,
So just another question to ask on here, and I know there's other questions as well to come, but in terms of this, what's worrying me, and perhaps if you could confirm, is that you've got enough freedom, because we've ended up going down a particular path in the last paper that we ended up leaving on the table because of the series of events and the series of recommendations that council had made. But what I'm hearing is that actually there's need for some freedom in terms of understanding, like building a scope and looking at a range of different aspects of what might need to be considered in there, the locations, the various things. And so my concern is if we end up approving 3.1, 3.2, or 3.1 and 3.2, are we cutting you off with some of the freedom of scope that you are explaining you need to have? No. Okay, no. That's good to know.
I think we're not proceeding, Chair, with any particular work until we've got the endorsement of council to do that. So we'll bring back the scope, the information based off all of the discussions we've had over the last 6-12 months on this topic. It'll inform the decision making of the future council in that regard. So no, we wouldn't be limited in that respect. But it is talking about specifically addressing the issue around the quarries. That's the key thing. It's not a Canterbury-wide plains issue unless you choose to do some longer term research of ambient levels of particulate matter in that respect. So, but from what I'm hearing, it's sounding like that's possibly not the path you want to take. So we're kind of more focused on option recommendation 3 and its subparts. But the next step is to bring that back and get your endorsement about which way we go, because ultimately it costs money and that needs to be included into the budgets of council and considered through that process and engaged on, as Veronica said, with the community about how we pay for this.
Yep. Okay. So thanks. Councillor Edge.
Thanks, Jesse. Thanks for providing the maps that we see. What I'm a bit confused about, what I was wanting was a map showing the quarry zone. Is this the map? And what? There's nothing.
So through your chair, up on the top left-hand corner, where you see old West Coast Road and Old West Coast Road splits off, the sort of greeny grey colour is the rural quarry zone around Yaldhurst properties.
Sorry, so that doesn't seem to relate all that. If I mean, what would be useful for the council would be to see how that quarry zone impacts with the Christchurch air plan zone. Because it's just a bit vague. I don't know what the streets are or anything. So, yeah, it's really giving some clear indication of what is the reasoning behind the quarry zone and the expectation that zone is supposed to achieve. Is it supposed to achieve exactly what we're talking about here in terms of dust not crossing, the PM10 dust not crossing the boundary? Is that what that's supposed to be?
Through your chair, it's not just limited to the quarry zone as well. These are quarries that have expanded beyond the quarry zone as well through consents, both from Christchurch City and Environment Canterbury over time. So it's not just the quarry zone. That since we had the run through this morning, we haven't had time as staff to overlay quarry zone maps with airshed maps and things like that. So, but I think as part of this scoping exercise around monitoring, which has come back to the point of what the discussion is around monitoring, we would start to look at where the best place is for monitors to look at the levels of dust.
Thanks for that. Now, my next question is on page 19, number 11. It talks about that an updated health statement does not in itself trigger consent reviews without supporting activity-specific evidence. So by undertaking the reviews under 3.1 or 3.2, that potentially provides activity-specific evidence, which then can result in consent reviews. Is that correct?
Through you, Chair, as we discussed at the briefing and as our consenting team and explained around the Section 128 reviews for consents and the threshold for significant adverse effects, you need to the health statement plays a part in the discussion around the exposure, time for exposure to dust and what the adverse effects are of that. So this information may help us in terms of better understanding where we're seeing where the dust is going to, but whether that actually triggers the need for a consent review or not is something that we would need to look at on a case-by-case basis.
I asked that question on the basis of item 16, which Councillor Mackenzie referred to as well, that the issue of the targeted rate for residents who are potentially, if it is found in the research that we do, are not, that the quarries are actually causing, or the quarry dust is coming from the quarries, then in effect, why should our residents be targeted a rate for something that is being caused by somebody else? So is that potentially a scenario that could occur? That quarries are required under a consent review, given by additional scientific information, to actually pay for any issues related to dust.
Kind of speculating, this is the purpose of doing the work, is to better understand this, and if there are, effects happening beyond the boundaries of the quarries that are founded, then that's something we would need to address with the quarry operators. That's a whole point of our consenting and compliance processes, is to go through that process. So,
Chair, just a couple more questions for me. Yes, so I mean, I absolutely agree with the Chair, the freedom to ensure that in the scoping process we are considering some things that we haven't thought about before. So that would be good. I'm thinking of a precautionary approach to this, that we do, that we are cautious about potential existential threats to our communities from this dust business. My other question is related to the point that Chair Pauling made about the idea that an ecological assessment might pose from Te Whatu Ora a bit of a distraction. I had a look yesterday at plants, what happens to plants in terms of dust and the closing of stomata and the health of the plants. So it's not just a human thing. Excessive dust can actually cause plants to not perform well. Their leaf gets clogged up, they die, they don't perform, all of those sorts of things. Do you know, is it possible to just make some inquiries in terms of biological research into that kind of thing as part of the scoping exercise? The plant pathological type approach, which is something that we're here for as well. What are the considerations for the environment as well as people?
I did look up the guidelines for ecosystems that were produced from the Ministry for the Environment in 2002. I didn't find anything about PM particles in that list. It covered other things. But I am aware that there has been some research in terms of planting along roadsides, for instance, to prevent particles going further away from the roadside. So there is research that we can look into and present later on.
Sorry, last question for me. Page 35, item 68, it talks about that Environment Canterbury already has an avenue through the joint work plan arrangements with the Christchurch City Council and Te Whatu Ora to continue addressing any concerns. I'm just wondering if you could let us know what is the frequency of engagement with those two organisations, and how is Te Whatu Ora actually doing something when they sort of seem to be in terms of their research into health issues, which seems to be pretty poor. Are we regularly engaging with that joint working group by the sound of things?
So through you, Chair. So at a staff level, yes, we're on regular contact with both Christchurch City and Te Whatu Ora staff on a joint work program that covers a range of different things. In terms of health research, I can't comment on the degree of work that the Te Whatu Ora is doing in that respect. The joint work program has been around for about 10 years, and Councillor Scott was involved in this previously as well. Te Whatu Ora, obviously, with COVID and going through that process, has now started engaging a lot more than what they were for the last sort of few years, if you like. So this is something that's been reinvigorated again. Happy to bring a briefing back to the next council around what the joint work program is, what it covers, get Te Whatu Ora and Christchurch City Council staff in the room, and we can talk through that in a bit more detail. But it's, as I said, it's not just focused on quarries and dust. It's a broader sort of health and all policies type approach to the work that we do across the board. So, yeah, but in terms of research from Te Whatu Ora, that's I can't comment on exactly what they're doing in that respect.
That sounds good. So so councillors who are waiting, just to say, I've got Jolie, Councillor Mackay, Councillor Robinson, Councillor East, Councillor Burns again, and Liam. So just so you can sit easy and know your name's on the list. If it's not, let me know.
Just a question of process. We seem to be debating actually whether or not we're going to implement recommendations from the program rather than just scoping a program. So could we focus our questions on the potential of scoping a program rather than what the program itself looks like?
I think, well, what I'm trying to make sure is that we've all heard the answers to questions to understand what the differences are here, because I think it's actually it's quite tricky. I found this quite a difficult paper to understand and to know exactly what is the recommendation, that it all boils down to 3.1 or 3.2. So I'm personally feel it's quite helpful to have this process and to have these questions and make sure that we are understanding what are we potentially leaving out or could potentially go in, and having that captured. So thanks for your input, but I'm going to carry on as we are. Thank you. So Jolie, thank you.
Kia ora. I firstly just wanted to start by, I just wanted to talk what Councillor Swiggs was saying about more community engagement than the status quo. I thought that was a really good point. My question refers to point 38. It says, Te Whatu Ora staff suggested that Environment Canterbury could use data from quarry operators who are already monitoring PM10, and that costs could be borne by consent holders by imposing consent conditions. And then exploring like the legal options, but that was only if option 2 was chosen, and because we're not looking at option 2, it's between 3.1 and
sorry, hang on, Jolie, can I just check here? You're in the attachment, you're talking to the attachment?
Yes.
So the report that we had previously, and then the question you were asking though is relevant to this paper. Okay.
For whatever we implement out of the 2 options that are being debated, is there a reason why that you couldn't explore that for those 2 options, like why it was just specific to this one here? You can explore using information and data already used for these ones. On page 31.
Apologies, Chair. We've got a number of staff coming to the table because this is quite a complex issue, as you know. Yeah.
Kia ora koutou. I'm Claire Patterson, Principal Strategy Advisor, and I've been supporting De Lunica in terms of practice on this piece. So it's an issue of scope, with the scope that we were originally given as the strategy piece of work, and the scope being about research. So the feedback we got from Te Whatu Ora had a whole lot of things that could be done that weren't about research, but because we're working to a scope that was about plugging an information gap from a literature review that said there was a gap in the information, and to scope further research to plug the information gap, we couldn't then consider those types of options and analyse them. That would be a subsequent piece of work. So the recommendation 3.2 has that broader, takes from the Te Whatu Ora feedback and creates a broader space for additional scoping.
Okay, so happy with that? Yep. So then, Councillor Mackay.
Thanks very much. I'll put my name on the list for the first on discussion this time. Thank you, Chair. Just going back to the map, and Councillor Edge raised it. Am I reading this correctly, that there's about 4 rural zones or zones that or 3 that's specifically for quarrying, and a 4th one which is rural? And can somebody just explain what the hatchings are on this map? Is that significant or not significant?
So through you, Chair, so the hatched area across from the quarry zone is the prison land, corrections land. It's designated special purpose for that purpose. So, yep.
I'll make my comments, if I can, around 3.1 and 2 in the discussion. Thank you.
So then, Councillor Robinson.
I hope I can actually remember what I was going to say. No, I can. Thank you for having a whole group of experts at the table here. It's very beneficial to have, people coming and going, but mine is probably consent related as well, because we've got a group of affected people in the room, And I really want to sort of tease this out just a little bit with some questions. So with regards to some of the consents for quarries, and I'm just looking into some of them at the moment. So a lot of them actually have what they call a bond. And so prior to the commencement of any quarrying consent, they have what they call an exercising or enforceable bond. So that can be reviewed at any time. And so knowing that this was brought to us in a discussion from the public forum, and knowing that these conditions are within the consents, could possibly some of the things that we need to do and should be doing right now be part of the bond system, where it's a bit of an agreement where we have a bond required, but also in doing so, there's a partnership of information that's freely available so we can do our job. Otherwise, there's no point in having conditions that can't be reviewed, where we've got a community or more than one community that is seeking the effect, these effects from these activities. There's no doubt about there's some effects, and I want to know if there's something we can do now that addresses this through the bond system. Just a question about that.
Kia ora, councillors and everybody. My name is Vanessa Scott and I'm a Principal Consent Planner in the Consenting Department. I have a focus on air quality and air discharge matters. Bonds are an interesting thing. We generally take bonds for the purpose of rehabilitation of the quarry pits post-extraction. So those bonds' purpose is primarily to ensure that the rehabilitation of the land occurs according to the application and proposal that was before us and subsequently decided upon. With regards to your question over impacts, this is a compliance matter. So as we draft up consent conditions, we do impose monitoring requirements. We also have reporting requirements for the quarries to report on those dust exceedances and what's happening in the quarry. If those are exceeded, then it is our compliance staff that would need to look at what were the circumstances around any exceedances beyond the boundary, and it's really an operational approach that we take. How well you're managing your operations is how well you're going to mitigate those dust impacts leaving the property boundary, I guess, from the activity of quarrying. So as was raised earlier, specifically with regards to the crushing machinery and things, yes, we do look to require those to be located generally within the central parts of the quarries. Now, recognising that quarry operations kind of move upon rotation as they're extracting the gravel out of the pits or the land there. So the plant moves around as the quarry is being utilised and the gravel, etc., is extracted. So we have found to date that the best way in consents to kind of manage those effects from accumulating beyond the boundary is to take an operational approach to kind of control the locations of the crushing and screening activities. And we also impose wind speed and other measures within those consent conditions to further control, as best as we can, those adverse effects. But of course, the wind directions change, the activities within quarry pits are constantly changing as they're extracting the material out of the ground. So I guess, Councillor, my suggestion there is the bonds are really taken for rehabilitation, and the management of the dust effects really is a consenting and compliance sort of approach there, and operationally. So it really does rely on our quarry operators to be operating as they should be, recognising, yes, they're in a quarry zone, but there are a lot of sensitive receptors around this particular quarry zone of the Oldhurst.
Okay, thank you.
Does that help somewhat?
Yep. No,
it does. It's still, in my mind, is just like the triggering of, Section 128 of the review process, and it's very hard to almost trigger it by the way things are written. And the bond situation within the consent condition is actually quite non-descriptive, to be honest. So maybe that needs teasing out itself. But there needs to be something in a consent condition that gives more, I guess, acknowledgement of the effects of what could. Yeah. Anyway, that's just me. Thank you.
So, did you want to add anything more to that note?
Yes, I was just going to comment that the level of burden is really at the application stage when we're assessing an application for a quarry. So we are looking, and we do pull in technical experts to support both the applicant. We'll bring in technical experts to support, well, our activity is doing this over this location, we're going to operate round this way, the crushers, the screeners are going to be here. So we do air dispersion modelling quite often. I always say a model can only ever be proved wrong. However, what it is doing is starting to give us a sense of how far the activities and the volumes that they're extracting and what they're doing are going to move. And as part of our and as part of our work as consenting staff is to audit those applications. So I'm a planner, I'm not an air quality scientist. So again, I rely on my air quality scientists to review, we ask questions and we move through that process. If when we're hitting a point of our notification call that we're not certain, then it's not a non-notified recommendation, it is something else. And that is most definitely looking at limited notification and or full public notification. Yeah.
Thank you. So, Councillor East.
It's been a pretty frustrating hour, I would imagine, that we've been sitting here essentially hearing ideas around the positioning of monitoring silicon dust from our quarries. And then we've sort of talked about targeted rates, effectively sort of asking those that are affected to contribute to the problem, solving the problem. I'm probably a little frustrated in that, we're talking about the placement of monitoring systems, but effectively these people at the back of the room, it's not going to actually solve their problem. It's just going to tell us where it's coming from. And I look at for me, I think the problem is more in our approach to consenting. If you look at a number of industries, be them...
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry?
I'm getting there. Is that a question?
A lot of industry...
I think when you have no monitoring and when you've got the symptoms of silicosis, you all want to take on board the same story over and over again.
Sorry, we're trying to get to there, but thank you for your time. We will go.
So I suppose my question really is, having seen that outburst on the way out of the door, we are debating today a monitoring system. Great. But I also think we need to be looking at our consenting regime. If we take examples of industries and some farming practices, they're required to contain the effects of their activity within their operation. I'm concerned that we have a number of obstacles, I'll say, in our consenting process that do not require, to the extent it should be, the containment of the effects of the quarry within the boundaries of their operation. Some of these may be the take and use of water. So I'm really asking, these people are asking for answers to obligate the effects that they are experiencing. And we don't seem to be doing enough, I think, to curb the issue at its source. And if there are legal obstacles, the RMA Act needs changing in some parts or other. Aggregate is a huge part of the industry of this province.
Sorry, David, can I...
But we have people that are suffering, and we're not doing enough, I think, to actually make sure that the conditions that are imposed on our quarries are adequate to obviate the effects that residents around them are experiencing. That's my fourpence worth.
So, Councillor East, was there a question in there rather than
Yes, the question
statements?
is,
What's the question?
can we, as an organisation, look at the obstacles that we have to imposing conditions onto our quarry operators such that the problem is not spreading beyond their field of operation? And what are those potential obstacles, and what do we need to do to overcome them? Because we can put monitors out there. We
Sorry,
can find where it
David,
is,
Councillor
but
East,
it's
that
not
was
solving the problem.
Councillor East, that's a question. So thank you. Let's a staff answer.
Can I answer through you, Chair? So you've got neighbouring residents that are raising issues. You'll have quarry operators saying we're operating within our consents and we're compliant. And if we aren't compliant, then the council should take us to task on our non-compliance. It is exactly what Vanessa just said before. So the research site, the short-term research around the quarries, will give us an understanding of whether or not there is further issues and validate the points that the members of the community are saying. And if there is an issue, then we can address that. We can also look at the long-term monitoring, which we've talked about as well. So the other side of this is the quarry operators will also say they feel that they're operating within their consents and have legitimate operations in place. Our compliance and consenting teams work with them to work through consent conditions, to process their consents, to monitor compliance and things like that. If there are exceedances, that's our role as a regulator to resolve those issues. So that's kind of where we're at. That's at the point where we're hearing the community saying they've got a further concern. We're offering a solution here to do some further work to better understand the problem, then take that findings to then say, well, what else do we need to do after that to try and resolve some of these matters? That's where we're at in a nutshell.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Burns, you were asking another question?
I think I'll leave it for the debate, thanks.
Okay, and Liam, lucky last.
Thank you. I guess just, you might have already partially answered this, but like in terms of 3.1, is that going to be able, and yeah, just is that going to be able to provide like enough evidence to be able to support action? Like, are we going to be able to change practice by compliance? Are we going to be able to make changes to plans just by 3.1 alone? Because the reason why I asked that is because if we just need 3.1, then we don't need 3.2 later down the picture. Because at the end of the day, the residents kind of just want something done. But then if we don't have enough evidence by 3.1, then we are going to need something later down the picture too.
Good question. So I think that short-term research will give us a better understanding of what we need to do next. That's the key thing. So I think whether we need to do a long-term environmental monitoring side as well. That's I think if we do that first piece, then we can move into that second discussion as well. But let's scope all of that and what that looks like. And if there are consenting practices and conditions on consents that might change as part of the information that we're finding if there's an issue. So that's something we can look into further. So yeah, good points raised. Yeah.
Could I just make one more comment through the chair? We aren't actually doing nothing, councillors. We are in consents actually constantly reviewing and looking at the adequacy and efficacy of our consent conditions. And I'm currently working with compliance staff around tweaking our monitoring and control conditions at the moment to improve them. Like anything, consent conditions are an evolutionary piece. They constantly evolve and we constantly improve them. So we are currently working on that, looking at more regulatory monitoring tools, etc., etc. So any background research may help us, inform us, and put better controls on those consent conditions. Just one final comment. I note that Councillor East raised the matter about water and the availability of water and enough water. I can confirm that there is enough enough water. Yes, we do have over-allocated zones in our groundwater systems, but for the quarry zone in Yoldhurst, they don't just have to, there isn't just the groundwater allocation, which there is a permitted activity allowance of 10 cube a day. Now, that's a drop in the ocean for a big operator. That won't be enough to manage their dust management, but there is the opportunity to purchase of Christchurch City through their commercial portable supply. And I do know that some quarries do take that approach. And as you mentioned, there are other things such as polymers and other dust suppressants that can be engaged as well.
Okay, that's fabulous. Thank you. So if staff would like to leave the... Oh, one more. No, you're moving. So, staff would like to leave the table. Thank you for your time and your answers. So if we can put up the... Here we go. So what... Notes 1 and 2. We're going to do...
Vicky, I'm happy to move resolution 1, 2 and 3.2. And if Greg's happy to second, then I'll explain the reasons why I've done that, and then we can go into a debate about whether that's applicable. And if people want to do amendments and stuff, they can, but I just want to put an argument out there for 3.2 initially.
Okay, because
have I got a second?
Genevieve had also shadowed an amendment because I was, which was a 3.1 and 3.2 because it's scoping.
Can I move
this point?
3.2 first, and then you can deal with the amendment? But can I have my say?
Okay.
Is that all right?
Okay.
Well, you can't do an amendment until you've heard the first mover and seconder. You foreshadowed it, but you've got to let the mover and seconder speak first because you're not even in the debate yet.
So, so this doesn't mean that we couldn't also bring back in 3.1 to consider. That can be voted on separately after this. Yeah. Okay.
Well, once the debate's open, then the amendments can flow, but we haven't even opened the debate yet until myself and the seconder have spoken.
Yep.
Well, if the seconder wants to speak now, it doesn't have to, but the mover definitely speaks first.
Okay. So
we'll
start
thank you.
with this.
I'm going to try and explain this the best I can, everybody. Now, I think great questions and discussions, and that's understandable because it is a confusing, complex space. But I will draw our attention to Whatu Order's recommendation in Clause 18, as well as in the attachment in number 37 and 38, I think it is. Yep, 37 and 38, where they are clear, and Dr. Cheryl Brunton was here with us only a matter of weeks ago, was very clear that the most important thing that this regional council can do is more and better monitoring adjacent to quarries and residents, and in time to make that live would be great. That's the most important thing to do. And I also raised, like I said before, that they wrote to us in July and said that exploring differences between dust sources, i.e. background dust, is a distraction from the primary community concerns around health impacts of quarry dust discharges. Therefore, that's why I believe, while I agree that scoping 3.1, which the staff have already partially done because they're saying it's going to cost $100,000 to do 3.1, is important and should be seen alongside 3.2, we need to give the staff clear guidance on what our preference is. And my preference, that I'd hope you can agree with, is to back to Whatu Order, the advice that they've given us, clear advice to do the localised dust monitoring in residential areas around quarries for long-term environmental monitoring. Now, that could be more than one site. I hope it is, because like I said, the issue is more and better monitoring adjacent to quarries and residents to understand over the boundary issues. Now, the focus, and this is what I've heard from others, the focus on nuisance and visible dust is another red herring because PM10 is not visible. Neither is crystalline silica. We've heard that. So you've got to get monitoring devices in there because, yes, the community raise up when they see visible dust because why wouldn't you? Because they know that the issues are there, but that's not actually the issue. It's understanding that PM10 coming across the boundary into residence areas. Now, the reason, and I acknowledge the points from Genevieve about the bond, Now, good idea, but we can't prove it yet. So we can't say to the quarries, you have to pay for that, because we can't quite prove it. That's why the monitoring by us and 3.2 is really important, so we can understand it better. And I do acknowledge that a partnership with quarries would be really good, because they do collect their own data through their consents. Now, it's a bit like what we've heard with farm plan information. Sometimes the data that farm plans and collectives are capturing isn't quite making it in a way that's helpful for us here. So it's the same here. Quarries do gather data, they do their job. We need to mesh that together in time with information that we collect. That's why, again, 3.2 is really important. And I acknowledge Grant's point about the ecological effects and stuff, but at the moment, we've got to focus on the key issue here, which is around the human health issue that we're facing and that our community are bringing to us. Not to say that that's not important, because I'm sure it is, but I don't want to, again, we've got limited resources. What's the most important thing? And that is really why I don't support 3.1. I don't support 4, because the recommendation from Te Whatu Ora is clear. That will cost a lot of money, but may not help us at all in helping the key issue that we're trying to deal with here, which is the community and raising those matters. So that's why I've just moved 3.2. I don't disagree with Dion's additions that he put through the email, but I think that's without saying, because Te Whatu Ora's comments are already mentioned in the paper. And like I said, if this does come back to us and if this is supported, 3.1 can definitely be laid alongside 3.2 for us to assess at that time. But we need to give clear guidance to our staff that 3.2, supported by Te Whatu Ora, is the way to go. I'll stop now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Burns, did you want to speak to this now or hold?
I really don't have to add anything other than the key issues are human health. The key issues are, we've heard from the people here earlier on in their presentation. The other thing I would just add is, if we remind ourselves too, Te Whatu Ora have actually changed their position on the impacts of dust. So my view is, it'd be nice to sort of follow Councillor Ward by saying I absolutely agree with everything that Councillor Pauling has said. Kia ora.
Okay. Councillor Mackay.
Thank you very much. Look, I'm not going to support this as written here, because I actually do honestly believe, from a scientific point of view, that we actually need to know what that background contribution is. It's going to be far more useful from a planning and consents perspective for our staff, for the organisation. It certainly will also support the quarry operators in their practices as well. So I want to see some scientific rigour in our research program, which would be certainly starting off with 3.1 along the lines of the suggested resolution that Councillor Swiggs has put in around a staged program. But I would consider 3.1 and 3.2 in the recommendations. So I think that's quite important. I think Liam had a pretty good handle on it and the way he expressed it, and the need to do 3.1 at the start. As for looking at the effects on, I acknowledge the effects on the public health. I think that's something that we need to do. This is what this paper was around. It's around the public health effects for these residents around the quarries. As for the looking at ecological impacts, I don't think that's probably very significant. In that area, I would say the impacts of drought on vegetation would be far, far more significant. So it sort of pushes the dust impact into what I would see as a very much a background impact. Okay.
Councillor Sunkel.
Thank you. I cannot support the motion. It sits there as well. If I think about medicine, I think about diagnosis, I think about differentials, I can't disagree with the fact that there is potential health risk, and I absolutely understand there is dust in that catchment area. But if I cannot define where the dust comes from, then how does this organisation put in place measures to reduce that dust? If we believe all the dust comes from the quarries, and this isn't then that's great. But if the dust does not come from the quarries, it comes from the natural environment, the riverbed, across the plains, what is it that we can do about it? I'm not making excuses, but unless I understand what that background dust is and have the full science, then how can this council make a decision as to what should be put in place to alleviate the potential health effects that we are seeing? So just saying, yep, there are the effects, this is bad, people potentially have health issues, great. But it's like Canute, trying to stop the bloody sea if we do not understand where that dust is coming from. So 3.1 for me is absolutely critical in the science to understand where the dust come from. No question. Oh, no, you're shaking your head, Councillor Pauling. You have no understand. What's science look like? Science is a real understanding, okay? We need to know where it comes from, and then we need to give effect to it. We all know it's there. That's the simple piece for me. We need both 3.1 and 3.2 to be able to give effective controls to an issue as and where we see them. That's my view. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Swiggs.
So I think it's probably the appropriate time for me to move my amendment. And I think it's there. So I will speak to the, do I move it? And then I need a seconder, do I? And then I need to speak to it? Is that the process? I'm sorry, I'm actually not sure. So can I move an amendment? And that's the amendment. And I need a seconder before I can speak to it. Okay, so the reason that I wanted this is we're asking the staff to scope something for us to make a decision on in the next triennium. So, and I think it's more important to get both sides to it in the scoping exercise. So the short-term research site will inform some short-term data, some understanding of where potentially the issues are coming from, so that the long-term monitoring sites, consistent to what, and I've put that specifically there to be very clear about why, because the longer-term monitoring sites can work in tandem to when we're changing some of our policies and plans. And then we can measure against if those plans are changing. I think we can start changing plans around 2027. So let's get a couple of years of good research, in my opinion. But we're not actually debating that at the moment. We're just debating getting a scope. So I would actually prefer to get the scope to understand and then have the debate about, okay, do we spend the money? Because I have no idea really how much this is going to cost at this stage. Do we spend the money? Is the money that we're going to be spending and the people who are going to pay for that appropriate to the issues that we've been hearing, so that we can move forward? I don't disagree with anything about what Councillor Paul or Chair Pauline has said, but I do think that having the first part in the scoping of what we're trying to do, to have that come back so we can understand the options is really critical. And I think John and a couple of others have already said that. So that's why I've put that. And I'm asking it for it to be a staged program. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's either or at any stage. So just bring that back so that we can kind of understand what the costs, what it looks like, so that we can make a very good decision with all the information. That's really all I'm asking for in that space.
Thank you. Councillor Mackay, do you want to speak to that now?
I don't think there's any need to add. Thank you.
Okay. So Councillor Cranwell.
Kia ora tātou. I'll be voting against this. I like the substantive motion that's already been put on the floor. I agree with what Chair Pauline and also Councillor Burns has said. Especially 9 years we've been sitting around this table debating dust. We have the Councillor Scott, who was our put the air plan through, was the dust champion. Councillor Sunknall, you were there in and around your community regarding dust. We're still kind of debating it. We're still discussing it. I believe 3.2 is the one to go to, and then I'll be voting against this and supporting the standard. Kia ora.
Okay, Councillor Edge.
Look, I'm going to support this because I believe that what we've been discussing today is the opportunity for staff to broaden their scoping their view on scoping. And in fact, the words that you used, Chair, was freedom to explore wider scope. And also, from my perspective, this allows for consideration of the existential threats under these future processes that will help inform what we might do in going forward. So I certainly prefer this because it keeps the discussion open for a little bit longer.
Councillor Robinson?
I actually put in a very similar-ish amendment, but without the good wording of yours, Deputy Swiggs. I actually agree with this too, because realistically we cannot consent for a quarry based on conditions when we don't really know the data, if we don't have the short-term goals in sight. So I do support this. It's not much else to say, so thank you.
Councillor East?
Look, I'm comfortable with the Councillor Swiggs' amendment, but I would probably like to add a further point 4 that, and I've discussed with the staff, that request staff to present a paper to Council outlining consenting option and any impediments to changes that would allow greater control of dust emissions from quarries. We spoke with staff before, and there was an indication that they are working on some things and other options, and I'd like that to come back to us.
Okay, so is that something we can put as a secretarial note? Or?
Can I make a suggestion, just that could be something that comes to the next council through ERP, because it's operational and consents.
That sounds
good. Just do a secretarial note or something.
Yep. So that's to come back about how compliance and consenting is working and if there's impediments to good outcomes. So Councillor Sunkel?
Thank you. I do support this amendment. It speaks to what I spoke to before. Being part of that process right back in the day when the moat trial was put on place, we got an understanding that there was a great difficulty between distinguishing what was coming from the natural environment, what was coming from the quarries at that time, and an inference drawn from that. So knowing that in my mind, I want to see the continuation of the effectiveness of what was the moat trial, give the background information so that when we get to a point we can make an informed decision as to what should be applied down the line. That's the science of it. So I support this staged approach. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Scott?
Yeah, I'm just a bit confused here because I just said to Councillor Swiggs, and I want him to answer this question, I said, look, I thought that Chair Pauling made some good points when he spoke. And I said, I don't know if I can support this, Dion. And he said, one's research and one's collecting data. Well, they're both written the same way. So I can't see how this makes any difference at all, other than the Te Whara Ora bit at the end. But you would have thought that the Te Whara Ora are a partner with us in terms of what we do. They'll be included anyway. So I don't know if we're trying to actually put too much mascara on this thing. I don't know what we're trying to do here.
Liam?
Well, I just want to offer a couple comments just in regards to when we get through to the end of this process, if we decide to go with this amendment, if we go 3.1 and then we look at 3.1 at the end and then we go 3.2, it looks really expensive. If we have research and evidence to suggest that we are going to need to do 3.2, what do we do then? Because there seems to be kind of a suggestion that potentially 3.2 might be really expensive, and obviously we're going to get the report that tells us how much it's going to cost. This is because I'm not on the council, so I'm not going to be there for that discussion, right? So I just want to ensure that when councillors are looking at that, this amendment doesn't become kind of maybe a cop-out and for not doing 3.2 at the end of the day. I'm not suggesting that it's going to be. I just want to ensure that when councillors are looking at that decision, that they ensure that if 3.1 comes back with the necessary evidence, that they go ahead with 3.2.
That's what this motion says, right?
Chair Pauling?
Well said, Lee.
Thanks, Liam. I think you've hit the nail on the head, actually. And that's what I'm a little bit afraid of, is that we won't end up taking action when, again, I'm going to say it again, Te Whatu Ora have been really clear about what the most important course of action is here. I'm happy to read more from their written statement in July this year. They said again, a focus on dust, nuisance and failure to consider potential public health impacts of PM10 emitted from quarries is a concern. The whole background dust research stuff came from the PDP report, which they have also suggested that comments in the report suggest that the authors have been or still are involved with existing quarries in Canterbury. This may lead to perceptions of bias regarding their independence, particularly from affected communities. That's their words, not mine. And in the alternative, we support investigation into attenuation of long-term PM10 concentration near quarries. That's what 3.2 is all about. And, you know, to other councillors, we're all sitting here like we know more than them. Like, ask yourself the question, do you know more than Te Whatu Ora? I'm not a medical expert, but I'm going to back them on this one. And we're willing here to say, oh, yeah, we already know that's $100,000 for 3.1. What more do we need to know? We need to know what 3.2 is about. It's whether you support 3.2. So it's like we're willing to waste a bit of money when we've been told by the experts it's not needed. And again, it's about more and better monitoring adjacent to quarries and residents. That's what's needed. That's what the focus is. So I compel our councillors to support 3.2 and not this amendment.
So could I just, it would be helpful for me to understand from staff from a planning implication, because I get that Te Whatu Ora are very much around the health effects, but is that a 3.1 piece needed for our planning and compliance and consent side of things to actually be able to drive change within the quarries, i.e. providing some evidence as to what the source is? Can I have, perhaps a member of staff could come to the table and answer that question? Because my worry is we find out that, yep, absolutely, there's health effects and the dust levels are too high, but if we haven't tracked it back to a source, then... Hold on 1 minute, we need to do an extension and then you don't have to get cut off. Hold on 1 moment, we'll do that. Okay, so we've got a mover. We need to fill in the XX time. And that's the ward. So that's seconded. So all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Okay, that's passed. Thank you.
Yeah. So in order to change the policy position in the plan, I don't think that this specific either 3.1 or really 3.2 are going to have a massive impact on our ability to change the plan to take account of that new statement from Te Whatu Ora or from the new happens or the updated happens evidence. I think the kind of evidence that we'd be looking at for a plan change is a bit wider than just does the dust exist and where is it coming from. I think we know that there are impacts from quarries. We've got enough evidence to suggest that there is impacts from quarries. It's how we manage that in the future requires other kinds of information to inform it. This is 3.2 is probably helpful long term to understanding is that having an effect, that those management changes. But I think we don't, there's nothing compelling us to go out and do that data and able to make a change within the plan framework itself. And I'll pass on to Vanessa for consenting.
Sure. From a consenting perspective, as Lisa's kind of alluded to it, it's really just giving us more certainty about the levels of potential effects, which would enable us to impose or look to install further controls and measurements around the health, specifically around health impacts. Noting, as I think Jessie mentioned earlier, Te Whatu Ora hasn't really been able to engage with us post-COVID until really now, so we have had a bit of an information chasm there for quite a while. And in our air quality space, it's actually the only area in our work that we can consider health impacts as well as those environmental effects. So any more evidence that enables us, that gives us more certainty and weight that we can impose onto those applicants as we're working through that process is infinitely helpful.
And just in addition to that, in that red, orange, green table that you have around the impact at the bottom of the table and the colouring along there, so you'll see where for the localised in option 1, it was low because most of the benefit would probably be indirect, intangible. We couldn't find anything from our workshopping and discussions with the various people that there was somebody who said, yes, that would definitely be used and it would definitely change how things are. So just wanted to signal that that work has been done and is reflected in the paper in that space.
And so that option 1 is what's now 3.1. Is that what?
That's right. Yeah.
Yep.
So that table, that red, orange, green table of option 1 is 3.1.
Yep. And operational impact's low. Got you. Okay. Thank you. You can leave the table, I think, now. Thank you. Councillor Ward.
The $1 million question that was on the end of my tongue has been asked. We can't make decisions till we know where the dust comes from. And some of us are old enough to remember how back in the 80s and 90s when we had lots of droughts, there was lots of dust, and we still have those windstorms today. And so until we know where the dust comes from, I don't think we can proceed any further. So I do support this motion that's on the screen now.
Councillor Robinson.
There's just one word in this that really actually concerns me, is the background levels. And I think actually it would have a better outcome if we change the word background, because it doesn't describe anything. If you're looking at background wording, I reckon it would be either ambient or I think we need to actually include both levels in there. So we need to have, if we're going to spend money, it would have to be ambient and other levels of dust. So you can actually prescribe from that the outcome sort. That's just my words. I'm just concerned actually about that one word in there now that I overread it.
So just to clarify here, so anyone else want to speak at this point? So to clarify, this amendment needs to fail. So vote against if you want to bring back the previous substantive motion. To my way of thinking, now that I've heard staff and asked specifically around the planning and the impacts of either of these 3.1 or 2 on the planning processes and management of the quarries, I'm hearing that the first, the substantive motion 3.2 is the key issue here that could deliver on some outcomes. My feeling is to vote against this one. I'm entitled to my opinion. So I've listened and I've asked the questions, and that's what I've heard, and particularly pointing to the last paper, which says localised background levels of dust, etc. So 100 to 200 grand, operational impacts is low. So that doesn't sound like it's going to make a right lot of difference in my reading of that. So that's in this complex area. Staff have already done some work on that option 3.1, and we could have a secretarial note to bring back what's been done to date for the next council to understand. But to me, it sounds like the 3.2. My feeling is that 3.2 is the critical one here, and I would hate to think that anything we're doing is slowing up, making a difference for the communities that have been asking for help and support for an awfully long time now. So that's my kōrero. So I bring this one back then to Councillor Swiggs, as I think Councillor Mackay already spoke to this current amendment. No, do you want to speak to that now? And then Councillor Swiggs.
Well, the question is that what are you going to do with the information if you just got 3.2, as your chair has just suggested, that we do long-term monitoring? What do you do with the information? We tell people that, yes, there's a public health risk, but where does it leave us as an organisation? So my interpretation of what Vanessa said at a high level was that there would be some information that they could use from a consenting and evidence base. And I've heard from Lisa that there would be a lot more stuff involved if we were going to change our planning policy. So there is some benefit to the organisation of knowing what the background information is. It could turn out that the significance of the dust that's collected in a monitoring site, if it was run in conjunction with a long-term monitoring site, which I think is what might ultimately be agreed on by another council, shows that the significance from a quarry may be not very much in some places. It's not going to answer the critical question of the folk that are coming out, sitting at our table in the deputation we've just had this morning, and I think that Anna has been here a number of times, is what are you going to do about the issue? So...
Okay, yeah, no, I'm just wondering if we should bring, because Claire and I have got a completely opposite understanding of what our staff just said, which is problematic, because I'm sure we all want to make the best decision. So can I bring the staff back again, just to... It's an important vote here. I need to know that I'm making the best decision here. And I think all councillors should, we all should have that as a desire.
It's not only your decision, it's our decision too.
No, but often votes come very close. And so each of us needs to think about what we're voting. It's important that we understand when we vote. And you might be happy, but I'm not, because I'm now hearing that Claire's interpretation of what staff said previously is different from mine, and that's concerning. So once again, can I have from staff that whether I think the question is whether 3.1 adds to your ability. If you have 3.1, does it improve your ability to manage the quarrying and the dust levels, or is 3.2 unnecessary and we just look at 3.2?
So when we looked at it, there's no mechanism in the system that would ensure that what's produced is used and determines consent conditions set through a hearings process. But it is an information gap. So technically, I can't say that plugging the information gap of 3.1 would definitely directly relate to consent conditions set in hearings, because that is the hearings process. But would it be used by some people? There's no mechanism to make sure. It's an information gap, though. So if the information gap is plugged, it could be used. It currently can't be used if there's no information.
Okay, thank you. So I can see.
Does that make, like, we can't technically say, yes, that's going to generate this impact or benefit. We don't have the evidence. For me, that would be a practice issue to sit here and say that would be your assessment of it.
Okay.
Through you, Chair, can I just, Claire's right. We need to do the work to then understand what we can do from there. That's essentially it. So the vote is with you. As councillors now, you've got the options on the table to look at two options here. We have the information, we can then make an informed decision about whether or not we do need to do more with the quarries or not. We are continually working, as Vanessa said, with the quarry operators in terms of the work that they do and how do we, monitor with consent conditions and compliance. So,
Vanessa, I think you had a...
Yeah, sure. I think I just checked with one of our scientists. it really comes down to words and interpretations. 3.1, regardless of a long or short-term kind of monitoring approach, there are sort of different words there. In 3.1, it's localised background levels, and in 3.2, it's localised residential areas. It's really down to where those monitors are located. I think either one would provide some further certainty. What you're talking about here is what's coming into that quarry zone. What does that dusty environment look like coming into the zone? So then we can, with the quarries monitoring systems in the quarries, know then what's coming out of the zone. So then that gives us this, that's starting to draw a picture of, is it them or is it someone else? So I guess that's not very helpful for you, councillors, because it could be either or, I think.
Actually,
unless
sorry, just to correct that. So the difference between 3.1 and 3.2 is research and monitoring, and they are different statutory responsibilities, which would then affect, when we come back with that next piece, what that would look like, what the costings would look like, who benefits, who pays. So the main decision that we need to continue work on this is between 3 and 4, where is it about localised or is it about ambient Canterbury-wide? Because the previous scope we had was improving dust management in Canterbury, which was quite broad. So we are looking for that decision to steer us in our next work.
Okay. So Councillor Councillor Burns, as you wanted to speak to this.
Kia ora. Chair, I just wanted to clarify the words in 3. Request that staff prepare for the incoming council in the new triennium a detailed scope, including costs and benefits. Oh, sorry, we're on 3.2. But I'm just going back to this here, which is what the guts is about. It sounds like we're trying to make the decision now. We're looking at the next council. I think we've lost sight of that.
Yeah, it's the scope that's coming back. So this is setting the scope for the next council to make the decision. Yeah, Councillor Swiggs.
Yeah, no, thank you, Councillor Burns for saying that, because that was what I was going to say. We are just asking to scope this, and the reason that I wanted 3.1 and the critical word there is and 3.2 is because I want to do that background research. Because I do think that there is an information gap, and I'm hearing an information gap. And actually, what I'm thinking in the back of my mind is that we could work with those residents who are saying they're happy with something on their residential properties. Put something there for the meantime while we work on the longer term environmental monitoring, which will be baseline on the research that we have, and work with the industry. We've got them in here; they've got great research. They're more than welcome, happy to give us some of that data. I hope. Probably not getting a reaction, but they're just. We don't know what we don't know, and that's all I'm going to say. If you want to vote for this, cool. If you don't, 3.2 is important as well, so vote for that.
Okay, so we'll take the vote on this one then. So all those who are in favour of the amendment that's on the screen now, please say aye. Aye. All those against, please say aye. Oh, no, sorry. So it would might need to do a division, yeah. Is that do it, or do we just need hands, not division? Hands. Okay, so all those in favour of this one, please, hands up.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 4.
Okay, and those against?
5.
Oh, and Paul. Councillor Dice.
It's an aye from me.
No.
So that's 6 against.
Okay, so that's carried. The amendment's carried. Yeah, for this one. So that's. He said against. So we've got 8, 4, and 6 against. And so just to remind, so this will now come back as there will be scope. I think staff will have taken away what the importance is of this, and ultimately the intention of making sure we get some data and some improvements on the quarry zone, which is. Oh, now I have to do another motion. Okay, so now.
So that's not Chair Pauling and
Okay. Okay. So this is now so hang on. Do I need to now change the Chair Pauling? Councillor Burns, are you happy to?
We have voted the amendment, so the amendment in passing now becomes the substantive motion.
Yeah. So we need a different. Yeah. Okay. So in which case then, do I have a mover for this one? Yeah, I do, because Chair Pauling and Councillor Burns don't want to support this one now. So, I can move this one. So we've got Councillor Mackay, seconder. Councillor Swiggs. Or I can. Or Councillor Mackenzie. Okay, so all those who are in favour, please say aye. And those against? So I've got 2 against. So would you want that recorded? So, okay, 3. Councillor Cranwell, Robinson and Burns. And Councillor Diche, do you want to be recorded as against this one?
Yes, please.
Okay. Anyone else want to be recorded against? Nope. Okay, so that's carried. So now moving on to 4. Oh, do we want to? Can we just? Do we need to break for lunch or now?
Just say that was carried. Please. Vicky, can you say
Yeah. Okay, so that was carried, and then we're going to break for lunch, and we'll come back to this. Or it depends on how much people want to say, because we've got. It'd be quite nice to sort of finish it, wrap it up, and then staff can get away as well who are involved in this paper. Let's just finish it. So now recommendation 4. So do I have a mover for recommendation 4?
So will that lapse if we don't get a recommendation?
Yeah,
Is
I
that
think
correct?
so.
Okay,
If nobody's prepared to move it, then it just will go away. So I think I'm not seeing anyone wanting to move this one, so I think that one just fails. So that's or lapsed. There we are. And so now, can we take 5 to 8 all together? Yep. So 5 to 8 are up there. So that's writing to. So who's so Edge moving? Councillor Sunkel seconding. So all those. Do I want to speak to it?
I did have a slight amendment for 8 that I wanted to, but I'm not gonna. I'm just gonna remove that. Let's just keep going with the substantive. That's all.
I think it was. I think it was raised during the questioning around needing to, bringing in community. Community.
So what I'm saying is that I'm removing the amendment, and I'm just going to speak very briefly about.
Okay, got you. Okay, so in which case then, so Councillor Edge, do you want to speak to this?
Yes, because I had similar thoughts to Councillor Swiggs about the mechanism of communicating with our communities, but I think that can be done. In which case, I think it can be done later in discussions with the community. I'm particularly interested in the mechanism that's in place at the moment in terms of. Let's find this, Chair. The mechanism at the moment, which is related to item 68 on page 35, where it says Canterbury already has an avenue for joint work program arrangements with the City Council Te Whatuora, and you can probably ensure that discussion takes place in conjunction with our community as well. So I think that needs to be explored a bit more, but at the moment, I'm happy with that.
Okay, Councillor Sunkel? You're all good, you don't need to speak to it. Okay, Councillor Swiggs?
Yeah, I was just going to say, the amendment that I wanted was that that we would use a collaborative monitoring design the program collaboratively, like co-design it with the community, mana whenua and the industry, so that we don't leave them behind. Because to make this work, we need to build the trust. And at the moment, we don't have a heck of a lot of trust, so we need to do that. And so I just want to make sure that that is... I'm not going to make a resolution specifically about it, but from my perspective, that's what I expect, and I'd hope that would go through whatever happens next.
Are you sure you don't want to bring that amendment? Because, I mean, it's going to take another couple of minutes.
Chair, I would be happy for that amendment to be put forward. Thank you.
Do you want to do that, Councillor Swiggs? Or can we just make it as a note capture?
I've said it.
Okay, so we'll capture that. Okay, in which case, does anyone else want to speak to this? No. So in which case, then, all those who are in favour, please say aye. All those against? No one? So that's carried. Thank you. Okay, so we'll adjourn now for half an hour. So we'll come back in at 1:20. Thank you. Okay. Right. So we'll see if we can go. So, kia ora koutou. Welcome back to the strategy and policy meeting. So we are going to start now on item 9.3. So I signalled we'll do the order now for 9 in reverse order. So we're going to come in now with the land strategy, the draft land strategy. So would the staff like to come to the table to present this report? So we have Marie Willett, who is the Principal Strategy Advisor, and Jessie Burgess, Senior Strategy Manager, who will be... Oh, no, sorry, I've got the wrong names here. And sorry,
Sarah Worthington.
Of course, Sarah Worthington, who's Rivers team, in the Rivers team, who will be presenting this. So if you would like to present this. And just to note, actually, councillors, there was a separately circulated attachment to this, so you have a draft of the whole report, and then staff are actually going to just provide us with a presentation now as well. So, thank you.
Tēnā koutou katoa. We're returning to you today with another iteration of the draft land strategy. After the workshop on the 20th of August, we've incorporated the feedback that you gave us then, and we're seeking further feedback from you. Note that in the time frame to get the papers back to you, we weren't able to produce updated maps, but we are aware of the range of content and the interrelationships that you're interested in, and so we are going to work on those. Chair, if we take the paper as read, we've really only got about 3 slides of any substance here, and they just highlight the changes that we've made in response to your feedback at the workshop and identify some of the further work to do and then set out the next steps. Are you happy for us to just go through that fashion?
Yep, no, I think if you go through that and then councillors can ask questions.
Okay, thank you. So these it's a summary, the key engagement themes of the feedback that we got from you. So in general, we've reordered some of the document and added more information. In addition to the changes identified on this table, you'll note that we've added more detail, background, key challenges and objectives to the parks, forestry and leased and licensed land sections. They have existing dedicated teams and work programs. So those things we were able to get more information to put into there. In terms of the engagement themes on the table, in the public land, we've added a couple of paragraphs on page 67 of the agenda in the document, but that's the page number in the agenda, highlighting the opportunities for alignment and kītai approaches that the extensive and connected land holdings offer. That was a topic of some debate amongst you, so we thought we'd try and clarify the intent there. Data, we have added more data. We've been more explicit about the connections to the Braided River Revival Whakahaumanu Ngā Awa Pākihi 100-year strategy, including that work on our land contributes to the commitment to implement that strategy. We've added more information about existing land uses and values, including more direct links to the commercial and industrial uses. We've started to progress to address your feedback on vision and opportunities and to provide more structure to the highest and best use framework thinking. That those things are key parts of the further work that's required, and they will be the focus of our ongoing engagement with Papati Purunanga, who, while we've had initial conversations about the strategy development and the potential content, haven't seen this draft document, and they will likely have feedback that will require changes to the content. So the next steps are to receive feedback from you and integrate that into the next draft iteration of this document, and further ongoing engagement, particularly with Papati Purunanga staff and key external stakeholders. And as the Chair mentioned, we will be seeking adoption of this draft strategy in the next triennium.
Okay, so do we have... I've got Councillor Sunkel. Okay. Anyone else? Any questions? Councillor Scott?
Yeah, so thank you for this. It looks like we're making good progress. The Papatipu Runanga engagement, will that be runanga by runanga, or will that be like cohorts like the Peninsula and South Canterbury and North Canterbury?
To date, we have done that runanga by runanga, and that was the preference that they expressed at the present.
Councillor Edge?
Yeah, thanks for this update. I think it's excellent, and it's really, really good. I only have a few items, a few queries. On page 69 of the document, page 8 of the proposal, there's a section there called regional parks, and I think it would be helpful if there's some reference, if you think it's appropriate, some reference to the current park management plans, because they have been in the past in terms of a bit of a strategic approach. So it's like how are they going to be improved, updated, incorporated, in future thinking. And look, in page 71, I know in terms of multiple values, you've obviously got Q to Katai. The idea of the mentioning of a corridor approach, you kind of inferred it in terms of the way you've looked at things, and it's really pleasing that you have identified the on that very first page 4, really, the fact you're working with partners and agencies. So in a way, that corridor thing is kind of in the back of your mind anyway. And the other thing was on page 75 in that diagram, integrated delivery. I did think that in terms of the land, on page 76, right at the bottom, it's got policy enabling strategic assessment of opportunities to acquire and dispose of land. At the back of my mind, I thought there's an opportunity potentially to look at the reorganisation of land parcels, and I'm thinking of that those parcels of land by the Waimakariri River, where there's a whole lot of multiple leases across multiple land parcels. And if some of those were amalgamated, or you took them all away, and then you end up with almost a clean slate that would enable you to have a bit more of a comprehensive look at the opportunities and the constraints within that space. And there might be other land parcels like that as well. And whether or not that came under the adaptation bit, or whether it was linked to the finance and revenue optimised section, so that you potentially, there's an optimisation by rationalising existing land parcels. That's pretty much all I had to say, and yeah, look, thanks for the you've basically filled out a lot of the information that I was seeking as well originally. So yeah, it's very good. Although the map on page 63 doesn't go as far as Kaikoura and Huranui. And there are some land parcels which it is shown in the appendix too. But as a comprehensive view, mapping's always good. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Sunkel.
Thank you. No real questions. Just thank you for filling in. And I think the question I had or comment last time was the commercialisation. So I just see that integrated in quite clearly now within the objectives on page, put my glasses on, 76, and within the framework on 75. So 2 or 3 references to how we might maximise or whatever, but recognising the other values that sit beside it. So just saying, yeah, thank you for the presentation today and the way things have been written in.
Okay, thank you. So I've got Councillor Mackenzie.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I had concerns about point 13 in the agenda papers, which I can't find the reference to that wording in the draft draft strategy. So that's a good thing. Because I had an issue with you saying that additional outcomes acknowledge that traditional rating approaches cannot continue to fund the increasing investment required for flood and river resilience. I don't think that's a true statement across the board. It is in one or two rivers, but it's not in for the Waimak as an example, and probably not for the Rukaya, where we've got large land holdings and quite substantial income. So I was concerned about that statement, but it doesn't seem to have translated into the strategy. Has it? That philosophy hasn't translated into the strategy?
There is some wording in the purpose that reflects what you can see in point 13. So, yeah, traditional rating revenue approaches cannot continue. So it's that wording that you're concerned about.
So where is that, sorry?
Second paragraph on the right-hand column on page 4, or page 65. So that wording has been pulled through from both the 30-year infrastructure strategy messaging and also the 100-year Braided River Revival.
I think you've misunderstood probably the context in the River Revival, well, in the infrastructure, what do you call it, 100-year infrastructure investment thing. And that is the current rating system is struggling to fund the necessary works, but actually where you've got substantial land vested for that works, that land income is actually making a significant contribution. And actually, so the average ratepayer in Christchurch only pays $8 a rating unit because they are only picking up the gap between the $4.5 million that the land income brings and the $5 million it costs to run the scheme. And so the way it's written in 13, but I still can't find where it. I can't find anything in the purpose that I object to.
It's Councillor Mackenzie. It's on that page with the purpose across the top. It's in the right-hand column, and it's the second little block.
Yeah, I see. Now I see it. Yeah. So I've got to. I just think that cannot is the wrong term, but may be an appropriate adjective to use.
Yep, we take your point, so we'll reassess that one.
Okay, thank you. Then got Councillor Cranwell.
Kia ora kōrua. Chair Pauline raised it earlier this morning. It was in regards to ability to maybe land swap. So you probably, if you probably think about Ahuriri Lagoon or something like that, if you wanted to do some work in certain areas, could you swap land for ecan land? And is there a chance to look at that in the strategy at all?
Thank you. I think the objective that we've added in I'm using page 15, the one that Councillor Edge referred to, about the policy enabling acquisition and disposal of land. I think that we moved that in, it was an action in the implementation planning, and we've moved it in as an objective for visibility and to make the point, because we realise everyone's very interested in that. And I think that will definitely look at land swaps, land with mana whenua, strategic land purchases. The idea is to be able to look at how do we make the most of the opportunities, much like Councillor Edge was talking about, and I think all of those things will need to be included in that policy development.
Because I haven't got much else to comment on, because also, of course, in the meantime between August and now, you wouldn't have a chance to liaise or contact Runanga, because that's going to be a substantial bit of work. Just probably timeframes now, I suppose. Just on the land strategy coming back to the next council, I suppose, and then in the meantime, be engaging with the Runanga, which have land in their takiwa.
So we have started that engagement. Like I say, we've had quite a bit of initial engagement, but not on the actual strategy document itself. I have emailed some of the runanga and indicated to them that this draft is now available, and I've sent it to them, and I'm intending to follow up with the others. I think that we, now that we've got this much momentum, we're committed to keeping up with that, and I expect that we would bring that to the next council, depending on what their agenda cycle is. I would say it could be later this year or earlier next year. But we're now that we've had the initial engagement with the runanga, we're keen to keep progressing that.
Okay, Councillor Mackay.
Thank you. Just if I may go back to the point that Ian brought up, that was also one I'd marked around the traditional rating and revenue approaches cannot continue to fund. I think that whole sentence does need to be looked at, because the funding of our rating districts has generally been for flood control and flood and erosion control. A statutory responsibility, and now certainly we're becoming aware of the significance of climate resilience and environmental work that we want to do, and tying up with other strategies as well. So I'm on the same page as Councillor Mackenzie, and I think it's just a matter of rephrasing that and being clear around the why the traditional funding mechanism is now under pressure. And that is part of the discussion that you are leading, the Rivers team's leading, isn't it, through the rating districts and going to district councils as well.
Okay, this morning we had both Dion and Liam. You had a question you wanted to ask on this. Do you still want to? Or?
Yes, I was just asking a question around the commercial land that we have. There's not a huge amount of focus on that, including where we are now. Has there been any thought to our commercial land? I know that there were talk about the perpetual leases, which is commercial land, and there's commercial buildings on there, but more about the ancillary stuff that we've got here, over there. They're all part of the land that we hold.
That is part of our further work, working more closely with Giles's team about the work that they're doing. I think the focus of this strategy is very much on the land that we administer for the soil and water protection and endowment, and because all of that land plays a big part in a whole of river approach. If I hadn't envisaged, but taking direction from council, that the urban, well, not necessarily urban, but say the commercial, like the buildings we own next door, that they would be included in this. But if that's your direction, then
I think it would be it is a land strategy, and I think it would be remiss not to at least mention them somewhere. Like I know what you're trying to achieve with the land strategy and how that interrelates with the rivers and the flooding and everything, but I think it would be remiss to not mention commercial land that we hold, where we hold it, for what purposes, because there's always opportunities as well that may present themselves. Like we are looking at commercial land for commercial purposes, whether we own that or lease that for example, public transport. That's part of a land strategy that we should be thinking about for this council. So I just think there's something's missing in that space, and I think Giles would be probably the right director to talk to about how we structure that and at least make a mention of that within the strategy. That's just my personal opinion. I don't know what that is for everybody else, but it's something that I see as a gap in this.
I'd just like to register that I support what Dion's just said.
Okay, I've got. So Liam, did you want to raise a question?
I was just saying, like in the objectives, just continue support where it says mana whenua, practice mahinga kai throughout the Takua. We've had a few kind of people in the youth ropu who have mentioned that that's quite important in terms of not being able to do that as of currently, so wanting to do that in generations to the future. And I don't know whether it would be within the scope of this report, of strategy, but where you say engagement with mana whenua, if there's an ability to engage with youth as well on some of the kind of decisions that we make in terms of our land, and whether there's opportunities to work with, say, Lincoln University is a land university in Canterbury, right? And so it might be worth doing some stuff with them where possible. I don't know whether that's within the scope of the strategy or that's further down in implementation, but yeah.
So the opportunities for youth engagement will come through really strongly through the place-based engagement in our implementation. And the universities are a really good example. For example, as we're continuing to identify the values on our land and prioritising what we want to do there, there'll be opportunities to strengthen our work with universities on research and data and gathering information on those pieces of land. So it's definitely something we're holding in mind.
Thank you. Councillor Edge, another question?
Yeah, sorry, just a couple of questions. On the paper, page 59, item 12, it gives some bullet points of key objectives. It doesn't mention anything about opportunities for recreation, tourism, biodiversity and biosecurity. Is that a given under one of those bullet points, or are they something that could possibly be added in?
Is that under paragraph 12?
Paragraph 12.
I think they would be integrated under those outcomes. Those are the outcomes that we've used in the Braided River Revival Strategy, and we've added that extra finance and revenue optimised in the carbon negative one to the land strategy. I think that amongst those, that recreation would definitely be, particularly as the parks and the focus on parks is on recreation. I think they'd be incorporated in there.
Great, thank you. Just a supplementary question on the perpetual leases on page 69, and then they're mentioned again under the leased and licensed land section on page 82. Page 82 refers to that perpetual leases renewals every 20 years. If it's renewed in a 20-year, is there opportunity within that renewal process to amend the lease in any way?
Those reviews that are every 20 or 21 years, I know I did put 20 years in the paper, I didn't want to... that's a lease renewal. It's a legal and a format review, and so it incorporates any new legislation or regulation that's happened over that time, and any changes outside of legislative or regulatory requirements require the agreement of both of the parties. Every 5 to 7 years, there's a rent review, and for the higher value leases, that includes an independent valuation. There is the opportunity to make changes, but they must be by agreement.
Councillor Burns?
Kia ora, thanks, Chair. It's interesting listening to the commercialisation opportunities within the land, biodiversity, biosecurity, recreation, statutory requirements, regional parks, etc. I'm just wondering, what's the status of the 2010 policies on the management of environment Canterbury lands?
So thank you for your work on that and your reference to it. We're very cognizant of that policy document and also the individual park management plans that Councillor Edge referred to. At this point, we're seeing them as becoming a focus for the ongoing implementation and bringing forward they could do with some review, just probably for legislative purposes and probably updating them, but they're very, very sound resources, and I think we see them being pulled through in the implementation.
Okay, thank you. So I think that's all the councillors. No one else is wanting to ask any questions? No. Okay, so thanks very much. So staff can leave the table, and then we'll bring up. Here we go. Thank you. Thank you for all your work on the report. Like, it's come quite some way since we last had a briefing, so it's great to see, and I think lots of good, positive, constructive, supportive comments from councillors. So can I have a mover for this recommended? Councillor Edge and second down, Councillor Cranwell. I think this week's you've had a few today. So I'll open for debate. So who, Councillor Edge, would you like to speak to this?
Yep, I'll just start off. Yeah, look, this is really good. I think it's in a great direction. Obviously, you've got a few things to finish off, but as a way of, in terms of next steps, a little bit of refinement, but also engaging with stakeholder or Papatipi Runanga a wee bit more. And I think it's a very clear and concise document that going forward to have that adopted in the next triennium will make it really useful and clear for incoming councillors to understand where we're going with this. So, yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Cranwell?
I support some of those comments by Councillor Edge, but similar to we were talking about dust earlier, some of those legacy issues that have been with this council over the last 3 trienniums, and unfortunately, with a lot of the issues have been passed on to the next one. But this is a start. We've got it there. We've got the some of the maps that are going to be updated. Still got to work with mana whenua so they can exercise their rangatiratanga and then you work on this document. But it's there, and I'm really looking forward to see what the next council does with it, and then put it into practice. So we've, as I said, it's non-statutory. It's probably one of the things we're doing at the moment as this council is non-stat mahi. Unfortunately, because with this current government, but hopefully that changes in a year's time anyway. So on that note, kia ora.
Thank you. To Councillor Mackenzie.
Yeah, thank you. My comments are is that it's a good start, but if I can offer a bit of cautionary advice, and that is not to get too bogged down in excuses not to be able to do anything. So the more conditions you put around how we develop it or how we try to earn income from our land, the less likely we are to be able to earn income from our land, and that has an effect on rating rates and our ability to do stuff. So we just need to think about it going forward, how we balance those a bit. And I think to date, this document, this strategy is perhaps skewed towards doing nothing rather than actually achieving something. And that's a debate for the next council.
Okay, Councillor Ward.
Yeah, just reiterating really what Ian said. I mean, it's a great document. Don't get me wrong, but we do need balance going forward. And as a wee bit of area of caution there, and I guess I've been a little bit frustrated over the last 3 years with the maybe not enough discussions around how we could commercialise this land more going forward, e.g. solar farms as an example. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, so yeah, just to reiterate that I feel like this has moved in a really good direction, and it'll be for the next council now to pick it up and finish it off, get some other things signed off and then implemented. Of course, is the critical part, and I'm sure there might be some scope in it for some solar farms, as well as all the other things that we might be able to do with our land, and not least protecting the ecosystems that we have on some of our land as well. So thanks for that. So all those who are in favour, please say aye. Any against? No. So that's carried. Thank you. Now we've got Cecilia Ellis, who's Principal Strategy Advisor, will come and speak to the Central Government Update and Submission report back.
Kia ora koutou. So this is the regular standing update on anticipated central government consultations and submissions to report back. So I'll take it as read. Since the last meeting and the paper was drafted, there's been a number of updates and announcements, notably the passing of the Resource Management Consenting and Other Systems Changes Amendment Act, which you had a briefing on last week. Also the Local Government Water Services Acts and Public Works Critical Infrastructure Act. And also this paper presents the submission on the Local Government System Improvements Bill, which was lodged with the Select Committee at the end of August, and it's provided today for Council to receive and note.
Thank you. So do I have any questions from any councillors on this paper? Not looking like any. So I think that might be it. You off the hook. But yeah, thank you. And a good submission as well that got put in on the I can't find the title of it now. It's the long one. On the Governance and Administration Committee on the Local Government System Improvements Amendment Bill. So I know that was pretty much wholeheartedly supported by councillors who didn't have much to comment on it. So, and no comments now, so that's great. Okay, so now we're on to the final paper. Sorry, racing ahead. Sorry. So a mover got Councillor Ward. And I don't know that the youth can't, no, because they can't vote. So, no, we had this last time. Councillor Burns, you can. So all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? No. So that's carried, thank you. And then the final paper now is the Strategy and Policy Committee Resolution Status Report, so item 9.1. And so this one we've got, Tafflin will speak to this one.
Kia ora, councillors. So this paper is the standing paper that you get every meeting. We've got 3 pieces that are still on here that will be for the end of this triennium, one of which is completed. There are 2 noted in progress. One of them is the Canterbury Biodiversity Strategy Revitalisation, because that's moving on to council. So this, irrespective of council's decision, if you like, or if council decides not to adopt that, it will then be something that will be sitting on the council resolution after that. So then we just have the one more that's still outstanding, which is the planning framework, and the councillors are well aware of the fact that that is on hold at the moment. But obviously that work, the foundational work that the planning team talked to you about, is still ongoing, and that'll continue obviously through the through into the next triennium, and we'll be bringing that back to whichever council committee form that will take in the future triennium. So.
Okay, thank you. So do we have any questions on this one? No. Okay. So in that case, we need to bring the resolutions up on the screen. Here we go. And so can I have a mover? Councillor Ward, seconder, Councillor Robinson. And so can I have all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? No. So that's carried. Thank you. So just now then to state that this is the last meeting of this triennium for the Strategy and Policy Committee. Next council will decide how they're going to structure their committees, and so this may resurrect or it may not. But obviously the work carries on, and I know we'll be very, there's plenty to do. And there are some things, obviously, as we've just heard, will be carried over and have to be picked back up. So declaring the meeting. Now, one thing I did want to say was just a particular thank you to our youth representatives. This came specifically onto this committee, and it's been really welcome. You're been very welcomed and very constructive on the committee. So thank you for that. And also just to acknowledge the fact that you also have come into some of the briefings that have enabled you to really participate in more than just this sort of public-facing, more sort of strictly managed committee meetings. So thank you for that too. And so I'll declare the meeting closed. We are going to have, we've got speakers coming in a little later, so we'll have a Karakia to close at that point in time. And so I'll just declare the meeting closed now, just before 2:00.